everybody. Here we are at the Potosa Accordion Shop in Linwood, Washington. I just found out, because I misspelled it on the email twice, that Linwood has two N's. Is that right?
It does.
Two N's.
Two
Linwood,
N's.
Washington. And I'm here with the wonderful, wonderful Toby Hanson. Toby is a wonderful dude, and I met him for the first time last year at Leavenworth. We did the judging thing together. And then when I moved to Seattle, everybody was constantly like, "Do you know about Toby? Have you met Toby?" And I was like, I know Toby, but I haven't hung out with Toby. So this seemed like just the most serendipitous thing to like get together here. Toby came by the shop a few weeks ago and just played music for everyone. It was wonderful. And I'd like to get started by just really quickly reading Toby's bio, and then we'll get into some music. Toby Hanson is a well-studied accordionist and pianist with experience in a wide range of musical styles. A Magna cum laude graduate of Cornish College of the Arts, he's built a career playing both as a solo artist and with various bands. His breadth of experience encompasses multiple styles, including French, German, Italian, Scandinavian, Slovenian, Balkan, and American. Mr. Hanson is the musical director of the Valse Café Orchestra, founder and leader of the Smilin Scandinavians Polka Band, and a member of Cowgirl's Dream, Rouge French Cabaret Ensemble, the Jangles, the Highball Boys, and various other groups. He is active in all phases of the music business and has produced and played on numerous recordings. In April 2015, Mr. Hanson was privileged to serve as music director for an off-Broadway production of the Polish Diva. Does that mean is greater than, that little symbol?
Yes.
Okay. Polish Diva greater than from Milwaukee? How does that work?
Well, the symbol is not a part of the title.
Okay.
That's probably just email parsing.
I was thinking that maybe there was some kind of cool code that you put in there. I didn't know. Something very hip and new. So it's the Polish Diva from Milwaukee in New York City. His most recent accomplishment is election to the Northwest Western Swing Hall of Fame as a member of the 2018 class of inductees. And that was really cool. I saw that you posted that. It was really a neat thing. Toby, all kinds of stuff to talk about, things to rap about. But I think it'd be wonderful if you could just start us off with a tune.
Sure thing.
Let's do it.
Well, we'll start off with a good polka, because that's kind of where I first started my career, was cranking out the polkas. So we'll probably get a chance to talk about this a little later in the interview. I'm just finishing up a new recording right now with my friend Lyle Schaefer, another really great accordionist in the area. And we did a whole bunch of duets. Last year at the Leavenworth Accordion Celebration, we had the concert where we played all the polka duets and people loved it. Well, everybody said, "Hey, you guys got to record that." And we did the concert like 3 more times at various accordion events in the Northwest. And finally in January we said, yeah, I guess we probably should record that. So I'll play one of the tunes we did on there. It's called Polka 76. It's a good Vern Meisner number. He wrote it for the bicentennial, which means that it's almost 50 years old now, because the 250th anniversary for America is coming up in 2026, and we're getting kind of close to that. So
That's surprising, right?
I know. 200, that's a quarter of a millennium. So here's Vern Meisner's Polka 76.
Yeah, Toby.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, the only thing that always confuses me with polka is because I'm so used to clapping on 2 and 4.
Yes.
And then, you go to these concerts and everybody's clapping on 1, and I feel it. I'm feeling what they're feeling, but in like the back of my mind from like school jazz stuff or whatever, I'm thinking like, is this right? I don't want to be that guy who's clapping on the wrong, because he's always the guy who's clapping on the wrong beat somewhere. I just don't want to be him.
Well, it's like that old Duke Ellington video we've all seen, where he's doing the concert and the crowd starts clapping on 1 and 3, and he stops the band. He's like, "No, let me explain this. Clap on the backbeats, 2 and 4."
You got to just educate people,
Yeah.
And that's definitely what we're about. But before we get into too much, because I have a lot of questions about a lot of stuff, particularly about polka things, because like you're the person who I know that does polka the best at the moment. And that's like, in proximity at least.
Yeah. Perhaps in this room.
I
maybe.
believe it, and probably a lot farther than that too.
Yeah.
So, but before we do that, who doesn't like to talk about a little bit of gear?
Yeah.
What are you working on? What's this accordion you're playing? Let's talk about it.
Well, this is a 1962 pancordion baton with tone chamber. Growing up, I used to watch the Lawrence Welk Show with my grandparents on Saturday nights. Of course, who do we see every week on the Lawrence Welk Show but Myron Florin? And what does Myron play but the pan baton tone chamber? Now, Myron actually had several instruments he'd play on the show because he had a really sweet deal with Faith Defner for getting accordions. But the one he played most often was this model, the baton tone chamber model. And I always wanted one, since the time I was a little kid, and I'd watch Lawrence Welk, and I would see Myron, and then I would go get my little 96 bass Galanti that I used to have, and I would desperately try and play whatever Myron did. And I was usually not too successful because I was like 12 years old at the time. But I always wanted one of these, so I grew up and I went through a couple of other accordions that I've played, some that I've sold, some that I've kept. And I was on Facebook a couple of years ago talking to my friend Jeff Winard back in Wisconsin. And I told Jeff, I said, I'm looking for another full-size accordion with a chamber. If you happen to know of a pan baton with tone chamber with 3 middles that's tuned with a very slight musette, that is exactly what I want. And he said, "Oh, I know a guy who has that very instrument." So he got me in touch with Ron Rudosky up in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. And I talked to him on the phone, sent him a couple emails. He made a few recordings of what it sounded like. And I gave him my credit card number. I said, just pack it up and send it to me. And I got it. And I loved it so much from the moment I first put it on that I stood there for an hour and a half playing in front of the mirror, watching the white on the inside of the bellows as they opened and closed. It was just like watching Myron Florin when I was a kid. And the best thing about this instrument is, because of the age, because of the quality of the reeds, this thing is loud.
I was just saying that when we were doing our sound check, and I said, I thought that my accordion was loud. It's all relative.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something. Some of the loudest accordions that were ever made were those vintage Petosa AM 1100s with the Guido Baldi reeds. Mm-hmm. Those things, they play like silk. You just barely blow on them and you get the most beautiful tone, but you can play so loudly with those. Mm-hmm. When I was in Cleveland at Thanksgiving, they asked me to play, and I said I don't want to fly with my accordion because it's such a bother. They said, well, we'll get you one. So they said, yeah, we'll get you Eddie Habit's old accordion, which he was a polka legend in Cleveland. And so I thought I was going to play his, but there turned out to be something that happened, and somebody else had it at the time. So John Movick very graciously loaned me his AM 1100 that he had specially tuned for Cleveland-style polkas. So it's got 3 middles tuned dry. So it doesn't really have a musette. It's very dry. And that thing was amazing. It was like getting in a classic muscle car, like a 1970 Buick Grand Sport Stage 1 with the 455. You just breathe on the gas pedal and vroom,
I love it.
that accordion was just like it. And I actually, when I was playing on stage in Cleveland, Eddie Rodick came up to me and says, "Damn it, that accordion's louder than mine." And if you know Eddie, he has a reputation for being a very bold, very loud player. So that was quite a compliment.
Love it. Double riveted reeds?
Double riveted.
We were just talking about that the other day. I've talked about that with several people, and it's kind of like one of those things that people, I mean, I know from talking with Joey Misklin too that he was a big fan of the double riveted reeds, although he doesn't use a tone chambered pancordion. He's more of the no chamber guy.
Well, and you know, for Joey, he's doing a lot of stuff where he doesn't need to be able to really punch out things the way that I do, because a lot of the stuff I do, I really have to be a very decisive kind of musical leader. You know, sometimes it's defensive soloing. Like I play in bands sometimes where they never respect any of the rhythm section guys as soloists. So I really have to establish myself as a soloist so they go, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't be playing now."
Defensive.
This accordion is great for that.
Get out of my zone.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Well, I want to ask a lot of stuff about this whole thing between the Cleveland polka and what that exactly is and some of the nuances of that, because I heard it a lot, and I'm a very beginner about the polka stuff. But before we get into that, because I have a feeling we're gonna have lots to say, you want to play us another tune? Sure. Let's do it.
I'll give you a little Western swing now. That's sort of my most recent claim to fame. I've been playing in various Western swing and country bands for a little over 20 years now, and I got a huge surprise just about halfway through this month. I was at the Western Swing Society meeting here in Linwood in April, because they meet just around the corner at the Eagles Hall, and I found out that I was elected to the Hall of Fame. Now this is incredibly unusual, because the average Western Swing Hall of Famer is somebody who's been playing for 40 or more years and has logged, you know, hundreds of thousands of miles on the road playing Western Swing, going all over the place. But I've had the very good fortune to play with a lot of great Western Swing bands. I spent about 10 years on the road with a band called Mended Heart, and I produced an album for them which was nominated for Album of the Year by the Academy of Western Artists. We lost out to Riders in the Sky, but, you know, I understand. They have a better accordion player, so. But that, my work with the Jangles and some of their recordings, and some of the other stuff that I've done in Western Swing, it's, you know, they felt that even in just 20 years of involvement in that community, they felt that I was worthy of enshrinement in the Hall of Fame. And there are only 2 other accordion players in the Northwest Western Swing Hall of Fame. Pedro DePaul, who did a lot of great playing with Spade Cooley and his band.
Oh, cool.
And then John Barwis, who's a local player up in Canada. He's in the Vancouver area.
Okay, neato.
So, you know, to be included with guys who've been playing 40 or more years professionally, you know, I'm just a kid compared to them. So it's quite an honor.
I love it.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
What's it gonna be?
San Antonio Rose.
Yeah.
Little Bob Wills.
wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
I love that tune. It's just a great song. Some songs are just timeless, you know?
Yeah. And if you really want to annoy the fiddle players, play it in B flat like I just did. So they like it in A, and I can play it in A. I can play it in J if I had to, but they hate going to the flat keys. But I love flat keys because in high school, in junior high, in elementary school, I played clarinet and saxophone. So flat keys are second nature to me, whereas I've always got to do a little bit more thinking in the sharp keys. But all those years of playing country music was good practice for getting used to soloing in the key of E.
Yeah, well, string players, guitar players love E, A, G, D.
Yep.
Violin players, similar. And then all the horn players, like if you're playing, any tune, it's going to be, at least for the standard, it's going to be F, B flat, E flat, A flat.
Yep.
So, and I feel that too. I'm not a big sharp fan.
Yeah.
There's just not my thing.
String player keys.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Wire heads.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of just jumping back to some polka stuff, because I do feel like, well, I'm going to be selfish and say that I just want to know more about the polka stuff. I don't know what everybody else wants to know, but let's go for it.
All right.
So what are like some of the, we know the essence of sort of the left hand of the polka playing, and I think like the kind of hop thing, but I'm thinking more like in terms of some of like the nuances of polka, in terms of the articulation, and then I kind of want to also touch on some of the different styles, namely this whole Cleveland style phenomenon. So let's start with like when you're playing a polka, you're like your articulation. What are the things that you're thinking about that really like to you make the style a little bit more authentic, or just what you like?
Well, the most important thing in polka phrasing is that phrasing in polkas happens in the extreme short term. Polkas are meant to be bouncy. It's got to have a rhythm that will get dancers to lift their feet. And there are many different styles of polka, but the one thing that unites all of them, and the one thing that really separates polkas from marches, is you want them to be bouncy. You want the upbeats to get people to lift their feet when they're dancing. So the way you do that is by phrasing it on a very small scale. If you take people who've never played a polka before and you say, play this sheet music, the tendency is to want to go with the kind of 4-bar, 8-bar, maybe 16-bar phrases that you find in a lot of other music. Take a jazz standard like How High the Moon. You play that and you're immediately thinking of 4-bar or 8-bar phrases because that's where the phrases make sense. But in a polka, the phrases tend to be very short. And so as a result of that, you have to really focus your thinking on very short phrases, and then you add those up in a sequence.
Okay.
So it's a different approach to phrasing. Because I hear a lot of people who try and play polkas and they'll do something like this. Technically, it's a polka, but it doesn't have the right feel. By shortening up note lengths and keeping things so the phrases are very short, it gives it the feel that you need to get people up and dancing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you see, putting some accents in, little crescendos and diminuendos on like a 1 or 2 measure basis. That's really what gives you that kind of polka phrasing. If you listen to the great players, you'll hear that.
I noticed too, so when I was in Leavenworth, I was hearing a lot of polka, of course, and just sort of the differences in, what I mean to say is that it's sort of marcato all the time. There's not a lot of like super legato playing, and this was something that Max, the accordion player from Andreas Keller, was talking a lot about that, and kind of like really harping on this whole idea of like American players kind of tend to play a little bit more legato, and that that, sort of the traditional way is much more marcato, not necessarily always staccato, but that things are a little bit separated. And I'm wondering if that has to do with the mechanics of the button box as well.
A little bit. A lot of polka tradition sort of comes from the button accordion, because that's where so much of that started, and where those tunes first started to get adapted to the accordion was on button accordion, not piano accordion, like all of us play around here. But it's not necessarily so much about the mechanics of the accordion. It has to do more with trying to impart the feel of the music through the playing. Like when you hear a really good Cajun fiddle player, you'll notice a lot of accents on downbeats and hitting the double stops on the fiddle really hard on the downbeats to impart that and really emphasize those downbeats. Well, in polka playing, you're trying to emphasize the upbeats, but you're not trying to emphasize them by playing heavier. You do it by playing lighter on the upbeats, and by using a lot of dotted rhythms and really kind of exaggerating that. If you hear a lot of the contemporary stuff from Slovenia and Austria, the Oberkreiner style, they will emphasize the dotted rhythms to the point that it becomes almost a swing rhythm, and instead of 2/4, it becomes 6/8.
I was going to ask about that. If it started to get a little bit swingy.
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Cool. Okay, so we have like kind of foundational polka knowledge in my brain now. Let's go to Cleveland style.
Cleveland, yes.
What is the deal with Cleveland style?
The deal with Cleveland style is Cleveland was the world's largest Slovenian city after Ljubljana. So something like 400,000, 500,000 Slovenes moved to Cleveland. Generally, the biggest period of emigration was after the First World War, because Slovenia had been part of Austria. And when the Austro-Hungarian Empire broke up and the political situation was very unstable, a lot of them said, now is our chance, we'll go to America. So Slovenians have an incredibly musical culture. Singing is a huge part of what they do. Choirs are an important part of Slovenian culture. And in fact, there are multiple Slovenian choirs in the Cleveland area. And they really keep that tradition of groups singing alive. So what happened is you get this large influx of Slovenes, and around 1920 you get this sort of crossroads of music where Dixieland jazz has just made it from New Orleans to Chicago, and it's starting to move around the Midwest. But at the same time, you have these Slovenian groups where they would have a button accordion, what they called a cheese box. They would bring in a banjo and a bass player, and then maybe a clarinet player to improvise some fills, which was really borrowed from Dixieland. So that goes on for a little while, and you get a guy named Matt Hoyer, who was sort of the father of Cleveland-style polka. He made a lot of recordings. Dr. William Lauschy, a dentist and also a very fine musician, he made some recordings, and it sort of codified this style of bouncy polkas with almost a jazz type of rhythm section and fill playing. So that sort of became very popular right around Cleveland. And then all of the big names started to emerge. Number one, you got America's Polka King, Frankie Yankovic. He took all kinds of Slovenian songs, put English words to them so that non-Slovenes could sing them. He became popular. Johnny Pecan, Lou Trebar. A little later, you had Eddie Habit, Richie Vadnal, Pete Sokach, a bunch of really great players who grew up in that style of music. After World War II, people were looking for something really lively and fun and happy, and so Cleveland became the hotbed of polka music in America. As much as there are other great polka towns, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Buffalo, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, places like that, Cleveland was the top of all of them. And so that really grew out of that Slovenian tradition and some of the American influences that came along with it.
So that would be the sort of the epicenter then.
Yep.
And so if we're going to Chicago, let's just going back to like Joy Miskelin playing with Frankie Yankovic, that kind of still that Cleveland style though, like Frankie Yankovic's band?
Well, there are some Cleveland style bands in Chicago. Bob Dosak has an excellent band. Bob has since retired to Arizona, but I believe his son Chris is keeping the band going. And the Cleveland style really became popular in Milwaukee. They had a guy named Louis Bichel, who was Milwaukee's polka king. He became incredibly popular, and he spread that Cleveland style around Milwaukee. But in Chicago, you've got a different ethnic makeup. Chicago, at the time, was the world's largest Polish city. And so you had a huge concentration of really great Polish musicians. Little Wally Jagiello, Eddie Blazonczyk, Lenny Gomulka, Little Richard Towalski, these great Polish players who play the songs differently. They're playing Polish material. And so they're playing it differently. Around Chicago, they have a style that really Eddie Blazonczyk kind of crystallized, where you'd have two trumpets, a Chemnitz or concertina, an accordion just doing bellow shakes, and then bass and drums. Sometimes you'd have trumpet and clarinet or trumpet and saxophone. But, you know, small bands, very loose, kind of relaxed feel, not quite as fast as the Cleveland style bands, but something that was a little different and very unique to the Chicago area. Now again, just like the Cleveland sound spread out all over the place, and you can find Cleveland style bands all across the country, the Chicago style spread. So you can find those bands all over the country as well.
This is the kind of stuff that I just think is super neat. Is like, I mean, it's music, but it's also kind of like history and community, and it's just this stuff that I think is so fascinating. Just like how these things kind of come about and who's playing them and when and where, and it's just some of my favorite stuff, really.
Yeah.
So that's rad. I think I could certainly continue to ask questions about polka, but let's do another tune,
all right,
and then we'll see what else kind of comes up, you know, just so we don't, maybe somebody else wants to hear of all the other amazing stuff you do.
Yeah.
I do, so.
The chat's loving it.
Excellent.
The chat is loving it. So what's it going to be, Toby?
All right, well, I got to do a good Scandinavian tune.
Oh, yeah.
You know, myself being Swedish and Norwegian, we have our own great accordion tradition, great players like Andrew Walter and Rune Nastadius, Carl Eulerbo, Myron Florin, of course, from the Lawrence Welk Show. A lot of great performers in that tradition. So I'm going to play one of Eulerbo's most famous tunes. This is another one that's sort of ubiquitous everywhere. It's Livet I Finnskogen, or Life in the Finnish Woods.
Oh, yeah. It's a beautiful tune.
Yeah.
So for the first time ever, we are doing this interview and allowing people, NAAC members, to come and hang out with us. And we have a couple today. We got Corey and Alex here today. And Corey, did you have a question? You had your hand up.
I was just talking about Toby, talking about different kinds of music. Things. I always tell people, traditional music always has good food.
Yes.
Absolutely. And you know, what else is, I mean, what's the best stuff in life? Love, food, music. I think that's it. No, those are mine, you know.
And let me tell you, if you ever go to Cleveland and you love a good sausage, I was there for Thanksgiving. The Slovenians have the most amazing smoked sausage. It is incredible.
I like all food. I figure if somebody likes it, it's probably me too.
Yes.
You know?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, I know we spent a minute on the Cleveland style polka. And you had mentioned that the Cleveland style polka tuning is dry. Is there a reason for that? Or did I miss that? Or
Can I just reiterate, because they're not on the mic, so I wanted just to kind of double up on that. So the question was about Cleveland tuning being three middles but still being dry. Is that right? Okay, cool. Just want to double check.
Well, I can explain that a little bit. I don't know exactly why that became popular in Cleveland. So I can't answer that. You'd have to go find one of the great Cleveland accordion technicians like John Boudet or someone like that. I'm sure that Joshua Kay is probably back in Cleveland watching this now, shouting out the answer at his computer screen. But I don't know for sure exactly why it was that became popular, but it did. You know, what we're used to in a dry-tuned accordion is a low, two middles, and a high. So bassoon, two clarinets, and piccolo. Occasionally the clarinets may be tuned as much as 3 cents apart. So you get just a very subtle sort of beating, like where it's just slightly wet. Well, what developed in Cleveland was a desire for accordions that had 3 sets of middle reeds tuned completely dry. So you can't really hear any difference. But what it does is it gives the most incredible punch to the sound. So when somebody's playing one of those traditional Slovenian tunes, you can't quite approximate it on this instrument because this one is just naturally loud and it has a chamber. But for a non-chambered instrument with 3 middles, it's very punchy, like... So it's got a real punch to the sound because you don't want to play a bunch of big chords in Cleveland style because there's another guy right next to you with an accordion who's playing all of the fill parts. So you cannot play too much yourself, otherwise you cover up what he or she is going to be doing.
Sure. Sensitive playing.
Yes.
Pay attention to your band, people.
Yes.
Very nice of you to do. So can you just play the 3 middles? So this is 3 middles, is that right?
Yes.
Can you play the 3 middles together just so we can kind of hear?
Now, on this box, it's tuned a little bit wet.
Okay.
I bought this from Ron Rudosky. Ron Rudosky bought this from Michael Opitz in Minnesota, who bought it in a pawn shop in Duluth in 1982. Well, this was originally a dry-tuned box.
Okay.
Pancordion did not make musettes with a tone chamber. They didn't do 3 middles with a chamber. Faith Defner was very specific about what she liked in the accordions that she built. So it was possible to custom order such a thing, but this configuration is incredibly rare. Michael actually had it redone with the 3 middles and tuned like a button box. So on this box, it's got a very subtle musette to it. So it's sort of comparable to what you'd get on an Austrian or Slovenian style button box. Now the 3 middle sound would be a little bit closer to what I have on the violin switch.
Gotcha.
Where it's just barely a hint of wetness.
It sounds great, and the chambered sound on top of that.
Yeah.
Like it sounds great. It's really warm and still
Yeah.
kind of, but it still has a way of cutting through. It's a cool sounding box. It's really fun.
And the bassoon reeds on this instrument are just amazing. It's like wrapping up in a warm, heavy wool blanket in the winter.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. So we should talk about some of the other musical stuff that you got going because you
Yeah.
have a lot. You play in French stuff. You play Western stuff. You play polka stuff. What are you kind of getting into most right now? I mean, what's kind of fueling you?
Well, right now, I'm just wrapping up this recording with Lyle, and I've had so much fun in the studio because, I've admired Lyle's playing for years. Ever since I first met him over 20 years ago, I thought, what a fantastic accordionist. And I learned a lot about phrasing and timing in polka music from listening to Lyle and his late brother Lynn, who was also a fantastic accordionist. And I really learned something that, you hear a good swing band do it, where the rhythm section is absolutely right on the top of the beat, and then the soloist can play ever so slightly behind the beat, and it just gives it that great soulful quality. You can do that with a polka when you've got a really tight rhythm section. You can just play a little bit behind the beat at the beginning of a phrase and then kind of rush ahead and give it an incredible energy. And Lyle's one of the best guys at doing that. So I had a lot of fun because I really had to match his articulations in the studio because we played a lot of close duets. I've got my Joe Bazille French musette book at home, and I'm working on learning some new stuff for that because I play with Rouge, and since we play for a lot of the same crowd repeatedly, I'm always trying to add new musettes that I can play. And then I just recently, just last week, finished reading Bob Dolgan's book about Frank Yankovic and his life, and talking about a lot of the great Slovenian music in there. It makes me want to go out and just spend 2 hours a day on YouTube listening to some traditional Slovenian stuff and transcribing it and really learning to adapt a lot of those Slovenian licks. And then with this Western Swing Hall of Fame induction coming up in August, I'm thinking, gosh, now I got to learn a whole bunch of fiddle tunes so I can play, because I always have the Hall of Fame inductees play in a band together. And so, I'm usually the sideman on these jobs, but I've got to get up and lead at least one tune when I do this. So now I'm thinking, gosh, everybody knows all the standard Bob Wills stuff. So I'm thinking I should learn something that other people don't know as well, so I can do something a little bit unique.
Absolutely. Sounds like you got to get into the shed, man.
I do. If I had nothing else to do in life but study and practice music, that would be as good as it gets. Music is the one thing that I just find endlessly fascinating. I am never done learning. I have a 4-year degree. I've played professionally for almost 30 years now, and I still feel like I'm just starting.
It's a good feeling, though. I think that's how you got to be if you really want to, if you think you know it all, like how you going to keep growing,
Exactly.
You got to be
Humble and hungry.
humble
That's right.
and hungry. I second that. Well, I think we have a couple more things I'd like to ask you about,
All
kind
right.
of some ways to get your music and stuff, but I'd love to hear another tune if you got one in you.
Oh, I've got dozens of tunes.
I know you do.
I should probably play something French, since we were just talking about the French
Please.
stuff. Let's see how well I do with En Différence today. Not bad so far. Thank you.
I think it went down pretty good.
Yeah, except for a couple things there in the middle.
I don't think anybody heard that,
Nah.
Toby. You're just smashing.
Yeah.
Some of those are regional variations.
Corey says that was a regional variation. You know, it's everywhere has their own way of doing it.
Good idea.
Toby, where can we find your stuff?
Well, you can find it all over the place. You know, somebody once told me, you've never really made it in life until you find one of your CDs at a yard sale. And I actually had that experience a couple years ago in Issaquah. Somebody was selling one of my old CDs. I was like, $2? Come on!
Also, like, where's BMI at? You
Yeah.
know, like, where's that? Somebody's got to pay, right? Is that how that goes?
Yeah.
You're selling somebody's material, you know, they got to get theirs too.
So if you want to check out recordings, like everybody these days, go to CD Baby, look up the Smilin Scandinavians. You'll find all the stuff I've done there with my polka band, including our 2016 album release, 20 Years, which was nominated for Album of the Year by the National Cleveland Style Polka Hall of Fame. That was what took me back to Cleveland at Thanksgiving. I got the opportunity to go back and meet some of the greatest accordion players in polka music. Miskilin was there, of course. I got to meet Walter Ostanek, George Stadehar, Eddie Rodick, Fred Kuhar, Jeff Pecan, just Mike Schneider was there. So many great musicians were there, and that was a lot of fun. Also, if you want to check out some of my Western swing stuff, look up the Western swing bands that I've played with, like the Jangles and Cowgirl's Dream. They both have a presence on the web, so you can find that there. There are plenty of performance videos of me on YouTube from various gigs. I think the most views any of my YouTube videos have ever gotten is from my days playing with Mended Heart, which was a country gospel cowboy western swing band. And they were a really big deal back in the 90s and the early part of the 2000s. They had their own tour bus. I spent a lot of time on the road, living out of the tour bus, traveling with them, and we did a concert. And one of the features, since we did gospel music, is I did the old spiritual hymn, There's a Fountain Filled with Blood. So I would play it very slowly and reverently, and then I'd kick it off and we'd do it in rhythm, and then I'd do a really fast bellows shake at the end. It always got people up on their feet, clapping and stomping and things. So somebody did a video of that, and that has generated more interest than anything else I've put up on YouTube. That one video of There's a Fountain Filled with Blood that I did with Mended Heart. And it was a fantastic performance, probably the best I've ever played it.
I've seen it. And you got your cool cowboy hat on.
Yeah,
and
the
like your
hat.
black, like button-up kind of thing. You look
Yep.
very like Johnny Cash
Western
with the
shirt,
accordion.
yep.
Very cool. Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Toby, are there any, I'd like to just double check, are there any questions from members at this time as we're kind of getting a little bit near towards the end of our program? Just want to double check and make sure we follow through with everybody.
Ron wanted to know if Toby will be coming to Cleveland for Thanksgiving.
Ron Papaleo?
Yes.
You know, it all depends. I would love to. You know, if I could, I would pretty much move to Cleveland and add Vitch to my last name because I could, seriously, you can work 8 nights a week in Cleveland playing accordion. You know, out here we're lucky if we play twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could just play polka gigs in Cleveland and, you know, they're working constantly back there. They have 2 shifts of polka bands at the Hofbrauhaus in Cleveland. 2 shifts. It's amazing. Joey Tomsic plays there. I got to play with him in Las Vegas last year at the Southwest Polka Party. He takes a shift. Aaron Dussing has a fine band in Cleveland, and he takes a shift at the Hofbrauhaus. There is constant work for accordion players back there. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to swing the trip this year. It's kind of expensive to fly all the way to Cleveland, but I had 4 non-stop great days when I was there at the Polka Fest.
Wonderful. What else we got? Dallas, anybody? Also, I want to add that we have a double NAAC team right now because Dallas Vietti is also working behind the computer today. He's in town hanging out with me and Jamie Mashler, and we are playing accordion every day and eating foods and hanging out. So this has been a wonderful time. It's a perfect meetup for everybody. We got Toby and Dallas. We got Corey here. We got Alex. We got Jamie. What other questions we got, man?
Let's see. I'm filtering through the text. Keep talking.
Okay.
All right.
So, how many boxes do you have? Just for my, just because I like to ask, you know, how many accordions you packing?
I've kind of lost count.
That's great.
I have like 4 instruments that I use on a fairly regular basis. The pan, this is number 1 box. My Spano Musette, I got that brand new in 1997 from Rick Spano. It's the last instrument he ever imported from Italy, made by the Morbidoni brothers. Really nice box. I play that on my French gigs. I've got my Crucinelli that I use for teaching, and that's a nice box. It's a lot lighter than this one, handy for taking around to different students. And then I've got a little Hohner 72 bass for those times when I need to sound Mexican.
Oh, yes.
You know, the Hohner Corona 3-row has that very distinctive, bright sound. Well, I happened to run across this instrument. It's one that somebody gave to my uncle, and I traded him an accordion for it, and I got it, and it's the most perfect thing ever for when you need something bright and really Mexican sounding. So I've got that. I've got a couple other boxes that I'm not doing anything with right now. I've got a Pan Jet from about 1979. My friend Jack Cook gave that to me before he passed away, and it was completely redone in Salt Lake by Paul Pasquale. So it's a nice box, but it pretty much does the same things my Crucinelli does. So I'm probably going to turn around and sell that one. And then Jack also gave me a double-aught Excelsior from the early 1930s.
Whoa.
That belonged to Fred Martin. And Fred Martin was a legend in Western music. He was the band leader for Gene Autry when he had his radio show in Chicago, and then later when he moved out to Hollywood to do all the movies. So Fred Martin did all the recording with this instrument that I now have from about 1948 to 1958 with Gene Autry. So I've got that one, and I have plans in the future. I'd like to fix it up because it's a piece of musical history.
Uh-huh. I thought you were going to say something else.
No. History.
Do we have a question?
They want the 2 of you to play a Western swing tune.
Well, we're going to play a tune. We are definitely going to play a tune. And I suppose now is as good a time as any. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we haven't covered. We talked about where to get your stuff. We talked about your musical accolades. We've heard you play all kinds of stuff. You educated me on polka things, including the Cleveland polka. And I suppose we should just get right into it, shall we?
Yeah.
Cool. Let me put this microphone down and pick up this accordion. Oh. I'll just follow you, Toby.
All right.
I'm gonna take a back seat and just hang out.
I never get to play with anybody like that. It's so much fun to be able to sit down and, comp for someone else. I don't have to think of everything.
Toby, it's my pleasure to play with you, my friend, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all of your wonderful insight, and I just can't wait to see all the other stuff that you do, and you're going to be at Leavenworth, right?
Oh yeah, I'm there every year. One of the nice things about being a professional musician is I have the time to go to an event in Leavenworth, and I get to meet a lot of great people. I get to share some of my knowledge and insight, and most importantly, I get to give back to the accordion community, because 20 years ago, I was the young kid, still in college, going to all these events like Leavenworth and Kimberly, and I got so much support and encouragement there that now I get the chance to go back and do that for other young players. And I really look forward to that every year.
And that's what we want to do too. And I think that's why we want to have you, man. It's like, now everybody that wants to learn about polka, young people, old people, anybody, they can check this out and be like, oh, I heard Toby say this awesome thing, and now I'm going to run with it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it. Can't wait to see you in Leavenworth, and I'm sure I'll see you around town as well.
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Toby, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Gabe.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. All right, guys. Oh, I should probably also thank the people who,
Yes.
Joey's watching the live stream right now.
Oh, Joey. Hey, Joey. Then I definitely need to thank Patosa.
Yeah, he's checking up on me. He knows that I use all of his licks on the job, so.
So we should also thank Joey Patosa, Joe Patosa, the Patosas,
Yes.
and I also work here, so it's especially nice because I come here anyway.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Stay tuned to see this on the YouTube, and we have all kinds of cool projects going on. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do. If you have friends or family members, or if you would like to donate to the NAAC and all of our programs, all kinds of ways to do that on our website, thenaac.org. Thanks so much for tuning in, and see you next time.